everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you all for coming. My name is Heidi, and I'm here to talk about leather. So you're here in the right place if that's what you're looking for.
Oh, nope, I gotta go.
All right, this is a couple examples of projects that I've made over the past couple years. On the left, this is Merlos from Vagrant Story. It's a PlayStation 1 game. All of her armor is entirely made out of vegetable tanned leather, and the top of her dress as well is sewn out of chromium tanned leather, the garment leather essentially. Then in here in the middle, we have Asuna from Sword Art Online, probably pretty recognizable character for most of you guys. I made this costume last spring sometime. I was working on it, I think, this time last year. Again, all of the armor is vegetable tanned leather. The dress itself is actually made out of vinyl, but that's fine. You can ignore that. Then again, on the far right, we have examples of a belt buckle, the Triforce belt buckle, as well as some armored shoes that are entirely made out of vegetable tanned leather. As you can see, I like to do a lot of metallic effects on leather armor that I've made. So this is actually a really great, useful material for those types of designs, as well as things such as Asuna's armor that don't necessarily look like leather. You can get some really clean, beautiful, brightly colored pieces with that. So to get started, I'm going to explain the difference between the two major types of leather. There are other types of leather. These are determined by the tanning process and the chemicals that are put on it as it is processed, and that determines the properties that it has and the way that it behaves. And so you need to understand what these two categories are in order to begin making wise decisions about what types of materials you need for your project. So vegetable tanned leather, here on the left, this is tooling leather. This is pretty much anything that's rigid or has a lot of thickness to it is probably made out of this type of leather. This is a leather that you can do all kinds of impressions in the surface using knives or stamp pieces. This is really useful for making armor, holsters, and any pieces that need to maintain their own shape. You can stitch it on industrial sewing machines. Usually you have to have a pretty hardcore machine to be able to do that with vegetable tanned leather. Otherwise, you're going to be punching holes and stitching everything by hand to join these pieces together. Conversely, on the right, we have, it's actually called chromium tanned leather, not actual chrome, but chromium, the chemical. This is anything that's going to be used for garments for the most part. So like leather pants, leather jackets are made out of chromium tanned leather primarily. And so these are thinner garment leathers that you can frequently sew on your home sewing machine if you have the right equipment to go with it, which would include a leather sewing needle and probably either a walking foot or a Teflon foot or something like baby powder in order to help it slide through more easily. And this is best for any sort of heavy sewn items. Primarily, most of this panel is just going to be dealing with vegetable tanned leather. That's where most of my experience is, but I wanted you to understand the two differences so that you are able to make wise decisions about what you need and whether or not these processes are going to be useful for your projects. So here is a basic setup. These are some of the most useful tools that you should buy. So if you're interested in getting started, you might want to take a picture of this screen. This is, I think, one of the best starter kits that you can get, or at least some of these items you'll need to do anything. So starting in the middle, we have this stone slab. That is either marble or granite, something like that. This came in a kit from Tandy, but you can go into countertop companies, places that do resurfacing, things of that nature, and you can ask for sink cutouts or other scraps, and frequently they will either give them to you or sell them to you very cheaply, and you can use that as your work surface. The reason why you want to use a stone work surface is that it's very, very dense, and that is going to absorb the blow of your mallet hitting whatever you're working on. That's going to save your wrist and your arm a lot of pain in your joints because just physics, because of physics. The blow from your mallet is going to hurt a lot less, and you're going to be doing a lot of that type of hammering if you are making something that needs a lot of holes punched in it. Yes?
I can't see the picture. Is that a rubber mallet or a wood mallet?
That's actually a rawhide mallet. We'll get to that in a minute. Well, I guess we can get to that now, actually. They do make plastic and wooden and all sorts of resin, other types of mallets, and those are all useful. I like this rawhide mallet that I got in a kit from Tandy, that's why I use it. But I believe you can use other types as well. Next we have a small little cutting board, this white square with the rounded corners. This is just like a regular kitchen cutting board, something that has a little bit of thickness to it if you plan on using chisels and things of that nature. You don't want to punch straight through a thinner mat. So this red-handled punching tool right here is basically has a variety of different sized tips on it, these little dies, and you can punch different size holes with this tool. You can also buy these hole punching tools as little chisels and use your mallet depending on the situation. This does tend to do a lot of wear on your hands over time. You're going to end up with a lot more hand and forearm strength than you currently have if you embark on lots of heavy leatherworking, so just warning you now. Next up in this left-hand corner, we have a wooden tool that's sort of cross-shaped. This is a strap cutter, and this is adjustable. That cross piece you can move to be whatever width, I think within like 3 or 4 inches, and that will allow you to cut strips with a razor blade that's inside of this by running the handle down, and I have another example of that later on. Let's see, otherwise you're going to need something to cut your leather with. I have a utility knife, this blue metal knife, as well as some leather cutting shears in this image. The shears are really nice if you're working with thinner leathers and you want to go quickly and get like sharp turns and things of that nature. The only problem with them is that if you're using them on a much thicker hide, the closing motion of the scissors is going to twist the hide as you're cutting it, and so you'll end up with an edge that is not entirely perpendicular. So depending on what your project is, that may or may not pose problems. It is faster to use the shears, but a utility knife will always give you a good cut if you've got your hand perfectly upright and you're moving in a steady motion. So that's usually my go-to. There are a few other small tools in this image that I will get to that I have other slides with more information on. So let's see, starting with the edge beveler and the grooving tools. So these are essentially ways that you can add some finish to your leather items and help it look a little bit more polished and a little bit more finessed, I guess. So right here I have 2 different wrist cuffs. This one is for an Elsa from Suikoden 2, Elsa costume that I made last year. And this has really nice, clean, beveled edges that are cut into it, compared to this cuff that I made last week for my Rey from Star Wars costume, where I left all raw edges. And the reason for these 2 differences are the differences in the characters and the worlds that they come from and where they might have found their clothing items. And so because Rey, spoiler, is a scavenger, I figured that she doesn't have nice things. And so this is something that's a little bit more primitive, I guess, in the way that it's made. And so that is the purpose of the edge beveler and the grooving tools, is to give you these really beautiful smooth edges, which you can essentially burnish with some other tools that I'll explain later on. So what these are is, on the left, this one essentially cuts a little 45-degree angle into the edges of your leather. So you run it along the side and it's peeling up this very cornered edge. And you do that on the front and the back of your surface of your pieces, and it's going to give you a more rounded edge all the way around. The grooving tool that I'm showing here on the right is another adjustable tool. You can twist the little neck guy right there, and that will allow you to offset that cross piece by whatever distance you prefer. And you can essentially just run it along the edge of your leather piece and cut out a groove at whatever width you desire. This is a really simple way to add just a little bit of detail to something that's otherwise plain looking. I do like to embellish designs that I see in my reference images when I feel like it's called for. And this is just a little bit of detail that you can add to make it look like it belongs in the real world. Because a lot of the time, if you're working from especially like an older anime or a video game, the reference images that you find might not be very high quality, might not show very much detail, or maybe it's just a cartoon where there's not a lot of detail drawn, and that's the nature of the source material. It's not that those items are necessarily always intended to be simple, it's just the constraints of their media. So if you can add any sort of little details like this, it's going to make your item look more like it was made by a real person and designed to be worn in a real environment, I guess. So that's definitely things I like to do. Burnishing the edges is the way that you would finish that up. So on the left side, I've got this gum trag, for short. It is this weird mucus-looking substance that's essentially going to lubricate the edge of your leather, and then you can use either a plastic or a wooden tool. I believe these are called slickers, which you would rub along the edge, and you're compressing the fibers and essentially polishing them to where they harden and give you a smooth, burnished edge. So again, that's something that I've done here on this example, and you guys are welcome to come up and look at these at the end of the panel. I'll have some time for questions, and I'm here to talk to you guys if you want. I also brought this sample piece, which has a number of different tools that I used on it, on different areas, and then labeled what they are. So I'm about to pass this around, and this is going to show you an unfinished beveled edge, the groove that I've put here a 1/4 inch off of the edge, as well as the burnished edge, so you can see the difference and what you can accomplish with these tools. So if you don't mind, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to talk pretty briefly about leather tooling. I don't have a ton of experience, to be completely honest. This is some of the leather tooling that I've done, but I wanted to make you aware of it because there is sort of a whole world here that would take years and years to fully explore. And there are people who have done leather work for their entire lives that have these just incredibly intricate, masterful tooling samples that I wish I had something like that to show you. Unfortunately, I don't. But this is a method of using stamping tools and or cutting tools, such as a swivel knife, to put original designs on any part of your leather. This is the cross motif that Asuna has throughout her entire costume. So there are appliques on different pieces of the garments, as well as on the shoe toppers that she's wearing. So these are made out of leather, and in order to accomplish this, and again make it look like it's functional, belongs in the real world, I decided to use leather, cut my design out with a swivel knife, used some beveling stamps and a few different design stamps to just create a little bit more of a depth along the sides of these cuts. So this is just a very simple example of something that can be accomplished with tooling, and if you're interested in that, it would be a panel in and of itself. All right, here is a better example of the strap cutter in use. So this is up to 4 inches, 10 centimeters. This is a much more economical way of cutting lots of belts. You can buy belt blanks at leather stores that are basically just strips of leather that are ready to go as a belt. If all you need is a belt, then maybe that's better, that's cheaper, because you only have whatever 20 bucks that you want to spend on that one item. If you buy an entire hide, you're going to get much more leather for your money, and then you can cut your own straps out of that. So if you're doing something like Attack on Titan harnesses or something, any sort of rigging for the armor, I like to use leather straps for that as well. This is a great way to quickly and very precisely cut all of your straps at once. You just need to start by making a single solid straight edge with a knife or something like that, and then you can use a strap cutter to continue to cut away the rest of the entire hide if you want to, down into straps. Another tool that I really recommend getting for your inventory is affectionately referred to as the Amoeba Stamp. This is not the real name of the stamp. This is, I believe, a name that was coined by Kathy Jones of God Save the Queen Fashions, who is my mentor and is the person who taught me all of this leatherworking for the most part. I was her intern in 2014, and so learned a lot from her, including this technique, which I think is super useful for adding texture and weathering to any of your armor pieces. So in the middle, I have an example of a gauntlet from Merlot's. This is a different one, but it's made with the same methods. So this has sort of an interesting mottled texture all over it, and then I used that surface texture to lay in washes of thin paint that is providing more dimension. And it's designed to look like broken down metal, essentially. So this is the number, it's E29403 craft tool stamping tool is the correct name for it, aka Amoeba Stamp. This is the tool that you need that will allow you to do sort of these, just like a weird organic pattern. As you're stamping, you're gonna want to turn it continually as you're working so that you don't have something that looks very regular and repetitive. It's a very small, I think it's like the size of a dime or something, maybe a nickel, the head of this stamp, but you can do a lot with it and you can cover large areas if you use it well. So this is my go-to for anything that I need to look old, especially if it's metallic, and I want to do some aging on it. This is where I start. All right, let's talk about mock-ups. I love mock-ups. Mock-ups is anything that you are making out of some expensive material. It is always going to be worth your while and your money to do it out of a cheap material first. And this is going to give you a perfect pattern that will fit exactly right the first time because you've already done the work to make sure that it's correct. And then you take that mock-up apart and make it for real. It sounds really time-consuming, but if you get into a good workflow, this is going to save you a lot of time and headache in the long run because you will be crying yourself to sleep if you cut into all of your leather and then your pieces are wrong. So I really like to use craft foam for mock-ups anytime I'm doing a veg tan leather piece. This is the mock-up on the left in the purple for the same wrist cuff. It's just a piece of foam that I wrapped around my wrist, and then I determined where the holes would be and how long the straps would be, and all of those details were figured out first before I went to the leather, and then that was just a breeze because I was ready to assemble it as soon as everything was cut. Here in the middle I have a mock-up. This is what Asana's costume started out as. So I did drape the pattern for the sewing, for the dress itself, out of muslin. But the armor pieces, the chest piece, as well as these straps that she's wearing around her arms, I made these out of poster board first so that I could put them on myself, make sure that it was hanging, just check what my range of motion is, and determine all of those details and make sure they were correct and that I was happy with them before I went to the leather. And then on the right, this is a holster that I made, same deal. This craft foam I did stitch on a sewing machine to get that seam down the side. I believe we used a walking foot machine for that. So that's an option. You can sew through your craft foam in case you didn't know that. It just might take a little bit of extra equipment. So one of the really cool benefits of using leather is that it comes with all of these available hardware pieces that you can assemble it with. You can use rivets, snaps, Chicago screws. All of these are available for leatherworking and for stitching as well. And these are really great methods for assembling your pieces that do not involve adhesives. Adhesives are great, but a lot of the time when you see, like if you've made armor before and then over the months and the years it kind of gets a lot of wear and tear at whatever conventions you're at, and it starts falling apart. And for a lot of people I've found that the adhesive will fail before the rest of the armor. So if something breaks, it's most likely the glue that you use to put it together. You can avoid all of that by using stitching or rivets or those types of pieces to put everything together. So I have done some stitching on this piece. Anytime I'm using two pieces that need to come together at an angle with like a butted joint, I'm able to get this dimension by doing stitching, and I use that same technique for Asana's chest plate to do that curve along the front. The right-hand side, these are actually the plain pieces of her chest plate before I put them all together. So if you're going to do stitching like this, as you can see, I have pre-punched all of my holes before I started stitching anything together. That requires counting every single little hole on both sides of your two pieces that you're trying to put together to make sure that you have the same amount. Because if you get to halfway through and you realize, oh, there's like 20 more holes on this side than there is on the other side, then they're just not going to match up properly. So that does take a little bit of pre-planning and time to figure all of that out, but it's worth it to do it right. I use the same technique to connect this holster in the middle. I'm sorry, the holster's on the top, and then the sheath I made for her sword is on the bottom, stitched together this way. So the other options are rivets that come in various sizes and colors and finishes, as well as Chicago screws, which are two-sided screws that can be twisted together by hand with a screwdriver. And those are really great options for any time you need something that will pivot or anything that you might want to be removable at some point. Snaps also are a really, really great way to hold your armor together. I like to use snaps all over the place. Anytime I'm doing strapping, they usually snap rather than buckle, just because it's going to be a lot easier to get into.